Mike, I know you work with a lot of private equity firms and chat with them on a daily basis. Like, what are you seeing in the market right now as far as the value and weight that technology and operational efficiencies, are being looked at and evaluated?
It's a critical component to everything that they do. I'll give you an example. We're working on a transaction right now that's actually ended up distressed. The company had been in business since 1922. And just last year, they had an ERP implementation. They went from like on-site, they wanted to do a cloud-based. And so within that, during that transition, they lost over 15% of their revenue because of lost orders and everything like that. And so during that chaos, they had to then switch from focusing outward towards sales and doing everything else that they normally would do to like internal damage control. So instead of it being a regular way business, which they could have gotten really good value for, it's now in the hands of the bank, and it's a distressed situation that we're trying to go. And it was profitable, and now it's not profitable. So it really is important for that. And I think that when taking a step back from that, when PE, private equity firms go out and into the market, it's hard enough as it is because there's now 4,000 more PE firms in the U.S. than there are total McDonald's. If you think about that, that's an extremely saturated market, and they're all chasing the same deals. So when you go into it, you have to figure out, once they do make an acquisition, if they can get to the finish line there, they then have to spend the first 100 days really narrowing in, because that's the time to get this done, because they then have about 5 to 7 years for an exit. So if they're not thinking about this, or if they're not trying to integrate everything the right way right off the bat, it could be a distraction later, which hurts exit value at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, even the clients that we work with that, currently aren't held by private equity, I mean, we're getting asked questions about like, hey, if I'm thinking about selling in 3 years, 5 years, what do I need to be doing now? And we're counseling our clients on the same thing of like, look, you got to get your house in order, because this stuff really matters now, and it's not just you got to check the basic boxes. It's you need the right things in place.
100%. Because if you think about how much pressure these private equity firms are under, it's one thing to go and raise your capital. Now you have pension dollars in your fund. That's someone's livelihood at the end of the day. So you're trying to get uncorrelated returns and outsized returns for these people. So when you go out into the market and you start buying, you have to be a master of controlling the controllables. And if you can do that, you got to do that early. And I think one of the things your team does a great job that we've heard from all the clients is that they're really good about being fast. Precision is key. And it's not a lot of finger pointing to other vendors and stuff like that. It just doesn't help the process. And at the end of the day, we're never going to be a reason that they get dinged on valuation when it comes time to exit, because that's a controllable aspect. That's something we're experts in, that at the end of the day, we're aligned with the private equity firm and the portfolio company to maximize exit value, because it benefits everybody at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, that alignment we've seen is critical. I mean, you mentioned the 100-day plan. I mean, having that tech plan as part of that 100-day plan is absolutely critical. And, the coming in with the answers as quickly as possible and just executing. We've seen some real amazing results from a tech perspective of coming into organizations that had little automation, tons of manual back office process, no utilization of AI and processes, to rapidly bringing all those solutions to bear and really transforming a business through, whether it's ERP, AI, automation. These things add real value to a business, allow for scalability, and allow that portco to focus on driving revenue and not chasing manual processes.
100%. And I think, too, it's important for the portfolio or the private equity sponsors that have all these different portcos, to have them up on the same dashboard. The data is incredibly important as well, that they're able to analyze and look through, because that informs their next round of decision-making process, and then where to allocate capital accordingly at the end of the day. So I think you're spot on with that. And I think that, look, there's a lot of things that you can't control. You can't control, like the sponsors can't control when they exit. They have a time frame that they're targeting. So they have to do everything they can inwardly to look at that and say, okay, if we can get everything here, we can build up the EBITDA, build up the revenue, build up the profitability, add on some more acquisitions and get them integrated, and then have enough scale left over for the next acquirer to then integrate their systems. That's the key. And I think that's where, their time is much better spent once they acquire a business, starting the integration process, and then looking back outward again instead of looking inward constantly, because then they have to continue to acquire and continue to establish new funds.
Yeah, and I think getting ready for that next acquisition is something that we always try to counsel our clients on getting ahead of as well. Of, if you're typically, the next acquirer is going to be even further upstream than you are today.
Absolutely.
They're going to expect more sophistication, more access to real-time data, and have, making sure that things are in order. I mean, we see, clients that are stuck on something like a QuickBooks being dinged for that. Of like, what do you mean you're on QuickBooks still? And it starts, creating a question of, really where they are in their in the spectrum from a tech readiness perspective.
Absolutely. If you're a seller and you get to the point where there's a letter of intent is signed, and then they start doing their due diligence. So there's the number they will bid at, and then you'll start to chip away at that number. And if it's something that's controllable, like what we're doing on IT, I mean, they'll sit there, and that opens other doors of questions, right? It's like, what else are we missing here? If this is like this, how can we trust this number here or this number here? And it just adds in the question, what are we buying? How hard is this to integrate? It makes the transaction harder to consummate at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I mean, and when we're on that side of things, where we're doing the due diligence for our client, is that what you said is exactly true. As soon as a couple of maybe yellow flags start showing up, as far as like, well, what do you mean you don't have access to real time data, or you don't have a solid cybersecurity framework? That causes us to start digging deeper, and then it's usually we find more and more. And we start realizing that there's a very weak tech foundation, which is then going to be just that much more cleanup work that needs to be done post acquisition.
It causes all the other dominoes to fall. Once they start pulling the thread, you start seeing really what's behind the curtain. It can create other questions. I've seen more deals fall apart from something IT related more than anything on revenue recognition. It's a fact. It happens. And if you have this many private equity firms out in the market looking after deals, you're going to run into a lot more situations. The lower middle market has grown dramatically.
Yeah.
And then you also, and not to mention, the independent sponsor market has grown even like tenfold in the last 3 years. So you're talking about businesses that have EBITDA from break even to call it 5 million. And there's a lot of continuity that's just lacking in the back office especially. So that's something that I've been talking to our clients and our relationships about, that they're really excited about the fact that we do think that the way they do. We understand that there are going to be times we're going to have to pivot. Time is of the essence, because again, if we can focus on controlling the controllables, the one thing we can't focus or control is the exit window. So you never want to miss a window where there's a peak valuation opportunity for maximizing exit value because something wasn't controlled early on. And I think that's at the heart of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, agreed. And same goes for the clients that we work with, that they're kind of seeking that sale in the next 3 to 5 years.
Right.
We're trying to get way ahead of that, because you never know when that perfect moment's going to strike, and if we're not ready from a tech perspective, an ERP perspective, a cyber perspective, it's just going to slow the whole thing down, and again create questions where we could have just avoided them in the first place.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So we have a relationship that is actually getting ready to go to market with a portfolio company exit. And they were about 2 weeks away from launching the process. And they had a cybersecurity attack. And that stopped the entire process.
Sure.
During that window, 10 other portfolio companies from competing firms were able to get out to market in advance of them. And it kind of soaked up a lot of the appetite, and their valuation multiple ended up going down. Not to mention that they delayed returning capital for a year past the ideal target rate. So it's absolutely something very critical at all moments, not just in the beginning. It's monitoring all the way through.
Yeah.
Because you never know when the rogue waves are going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, and again, going back to that 100-day plan, I mean, then post-acquisition, I mean, it's like, let's get this thing done as quickly as possible, realize the value that tech can provide. What other things do you kind of see private equity firms kind of looking for in the market when it comes to just ability to execute and ability to really kind of drive results through technology?
Yeah, I think what they're really trying to focus on, how can I get as efficiency and in margin enhancement, right? Because when they come in, they're looking for different levers that they can pull. A lot of times it is on the IT and on the services side. So if that's a way for them to increase profitability and earn outsized returns, they're going to pull it. And so I think what they're really after, again, is having a team that they can trust to go in there and then tell them exactly what the problems are right up front without having any bias. Like, that's what I love about your team, is that you don't have any biases towards one system or another. It's whatever the situation dictates is what's going to get done. And I think that's an incredibly important part for what they're really trying to achieve, because once that trust factor is built, I think that's great for everybody, right? Then everybody can kind of grow together. But I do think that they are actually, they're trying to figure out all the different ways that they can pull margin, enhance margin, and then get it ready for the ultimate exit, either to a bigger fund or a strategic.
Yeah, and that's the part that I have a lot of fun doing, is like when we get into some of these high growth clients that are PE backed, there's a lot of opportunity for bolt-ons. It's okay, like, let's execute on the 100-day plan, but then, what's the bolt-on strategy? How can we get you ready to just, scale, integrate new acquisitions in as quickly as possible, move off of your new acquisitions legacy system as quickly as possible, realize the value of those new systems that we put in place as quickly as possible. So I think it's not only the post-acquisition 100-day plan of like, let's get the acquisition healthy and in a really stable position, but then how are we going to then set this thing up to then scale like a rocket ship?
Yeah.
And that's where it's really cool. Like, once we kind of get working with clients, all of a sudden it's like, all right, we got another one, we're ready to make another acquisition, and we're like, let's go. We got the plan in place, we got the systems in place. Tell us when, and we're ready.
Tell us when and where. Yeah, and I loved it the other day when you were like, hey, we had an exit. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, the portfolio company we're working for just got sold upstream to a larger one. I love the fact that you said we. Like, yeah, we had an exit. That means you did your job. You helped them do their job. They got a great valuation. And at the end of the day, it ends up helping the limited partners who are part of the pension plan.
Yeah, I mean, if we're doing things right, we all feel like we're part of the same team, working for the same goals, and it's understood, how the work we're doing is driving our PE firm's goals, our portco's goals, and we understand their goals, so that we're starting to tell them about, hey, look, we heard this is a goal of yours. We got to get ahead of this, because this is either a risk area, could slow things down. It just anticipating the things that could slow things down, our clients really value, because that's like the number one thing, is like, we want this done fast, but we want it done predictable. We want to know when there's roadblocks, we can clear them as quickly as possible. And that's the type of advice we try to give to our clients on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah, you guys are constantly skating to where the puck is going to be, not where it is. You have to. And I think that's incredibly valuable for what everybody's doing.
What else are you kind of seeing as far as, one of the things we get asked about a lot is like, need more access to data, more ways to pivot on our data. So one of the things we're always trying to do is look for opportunities to better leverage data to also not only provide better real-time, decision-making capabilities, but also like better tell a story of like, this is where we are, this is where we're going, this is what's coming. How often are private equity firms like asking, their portcos for data? Are they asking for more data than they have in the past? Like, what's going on in that space as far as expectations for portcos to deliver on data requests?
I mean, it's constant. It's constant, and it's not going to slow down. It's only going to increase, because at the end of the day, they're analyzing the data they're being fed now. Then they're going to look at the data and see, is there now seasonality within that data that we weren't anticipating? Or is the data telling us something? Because we all know the trend is your friend until the trend ends, right? So they got to figure out, is there another trend? Is this trend telling us something different? Does that help inform our next fund that we just raised? Should we be allocating dollars over here because of the data we're analyzing right now in real time from investments we made 5 years ago?
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredibly valuable to them, because it's data before it gets digested by the media and outside markets and, in publications, right before it then becomes normalized data. Like, people weren't talking about EBITDA 15 years ago, right? And now it's a norm. Like, my neighbor talks about it, right? Like, when we're taking the trash out. So everyone's gotten way more sophisticated as the amount of private equity funds have grown, which only means the competition is it's even bigger now. It's even more prevalent, and it's harder. It's harder for them to do their jobs, to one, make an acquisition, and then two, it's harder for them to integrate it, and then three, it's harder for them to then go out and find the next one. And then on top of that, once those dollars are allocated, they then have to go out and raise the next fund and do it all over again. So there's a lot of pressure on private equity funds and from all different angles. So again, if we can go in there and help them alleviate a lot of that pressure so they can be facing outwards instead of inwards, it's a really big value proposition.
Well, I think one of the interesting things too is, I mean, we're talking a lot about either the PE space right now, given our backgrounds, but the reality is, this is a very valid, legitimate business strategy as far as, doing things around systems optimization, automation, better access to data. Like, these are things that almost all businesses should really be focused 100%. On, because whether you're looking to sell or not, these are 100% direct impact on, revenue, efficiencies, operations, expenses, risk. So, we're talking really PE today, but the reality is this is way bigger than that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also, think about family-owned businesses that are in their third generation planning on handing it off to the fourth. And then all of a sudden the fourth generation comes home one day and say, you know what, I want to go a completely different direction. So if you had been planning for this succession plan to continue on, you probably left a lot of the back office operation stuff, kind of, all right, we'll get to it later. Well, later is now. And so you have to figure out, all right, now what are we going to do? How do we exit this? And you just lost 2 years because you're behind the 8 ball in planning. So yeah, it's absolutely something, whether you have a plan to exit the private equity or you've never even thought about it, it's something you should be preparing anyway.
Yeah, and I think that, if you look at kind of just the, where tech is today, it's weaved into everything, whether it's finance, operations, risk management, tech in many cases, like that's the foundation of what's behind it all.
Yeah, and I never really fully appreciated it until I started working with private equity funds and small business owners, right? Because I always assumed like, oh yeah, it's there. But then I've seen how many problems it's created if it's not taken care of. It's like going to the doctor, right? Yeah. The toughness will kill you, right? If you're not careful. So you have to, I think just by the last 10, 15 years working with these funds, it's been eye-opening how important it is to them.
Yeah, I need to extend on the doctor analogy too. The reality is, that a lot of these tech things are, keep doing the basics well, and don't let things get too far behind, and you'll be just fine. Right. So, that's what we really want to make sure that we're instilling in our clients, is that like tech upgrades, tech investments, it's not like this one thing you do every 10 years. It's you need the roadmap, you need the plan. As soon as we're done with the plan, we should have another plan, because that's how fast tech is changing today. Right. And as soon as you stop, focusing on tech, you're behind your competitors. Yeah. You're behind on, catching back up again when you really realize you need to catch up. So, we try to stay ahead of that curve and kind of keep the tech momentum going, so that we're never left in a spot where we're trying to figure out how to catch up, and we're having to make, rush decisions, or, get into a situation where we've created risk because we're behind.
Yeah. It's like staying in shape, right? You can't just focus on getting in seasonal shape for the summer or something. It's a necessary evil. It's just like your diet. It's the same thing. It's your IT diet has to be maintained and monitored at all times, or else you're going to run into issues and you're going to get caught off guard. And you're usually caught off guard at the worst possible time.
For sure.
So Greg, let's say you're talking to a smaller business owner or a private business owner, and maybe they're contemplating a sale. They're not sure which route to go. What would you tell them to start doing today?
Yeah, I think it's one, be good at the basics. Have a very solid cybersecurity foundation. That's always something that's going to be looked at during due diligence. It's looking at, do I have systems in place that are going to cause a buyer to be concerned that they're not going to have access to data, or there's a lot of inefficiency, in place. So, we try to get ahead of that. Typically, 2 to 3 years minimum of really trying to get ahead of a sale. We're starting to talk to a client about, let's minimize, inherent risk in the business through the use of technology, good cybersecurity best practices. Let's look at systems. Can you get access to that real-time data? Because when you start getting in the final phases of a sale, you're going to be asked for data left and right. And if you can't, deliver on that, people are going to start questioning, is this data even valid?
Right. So, how do you go about doing that day one? Is it do you do an on-site, or is it?
Yeah. So we typically, the biggest thing we really want to understand from our clients is what are your goals? What's keeping you up at night? Yeah. What's the business strategy? And then we'll typically build, a tech roadmap that aligns with that, so that all the tech decisions that we're making have very, very tangible. If we do this, here's the business result or the risk that we're mitigating or the revenue opportunity that we're unlocking. And, we find that especially for small and mid-sized businesses, they're not used to having a technology plan that ties to a business plan,
Right.
but that's really the expertise that we can bring into this is really understanding the business, what makes it tick, what drives revenue, where we can reduce expenses, reduce risk, and making sure that IT plan is just really, really, really tied to those business goals so that we say, hey, we need to make some investments here. We have a valid business case that's well understood by the C-suite, and then we're starting to kind of chip away at that over time. We don't need to do it all at once,
Right.
but especially if we have a longer runway, we can start looking at when do we make more capex heavy investments that may take some time to plan for versus let's kind of start chipping away at some of the easy stuff first. And even regardless of a sale, the stuff that we're doing should have results immediately as far as either reducing an inefficiency, driving process and creating efficiencies. So but it all ties back to we want a roadmap. We want our client to really understand that roadmap and why we're doing what we're doing, and then it's just a matter of executing at a pace that makes sense for that client.
Because I got to imagine a lot of them. If I were standing in their shoes, I would look at it as like an upfront expense now, and then you're seeing, like, you can't see where it's going.
Yeah.
So you have to really lay all that out for them.
Yeah, and that's where we've seen a lot of organizations get in trouble is they're only looking at the technology product right in front of them,
Right.
And they're not looking at kind of what the long-term continuity or the continuum is for how we evolve this thing over time. So instead of looking at that maybe 18-month, 24-month IT roadmap, we're making IT decisions in a vacuum, which maybe we're missing the bigger picture here,
100%.
where hey, if we can lay out this whole plan, it may be a big plan, it may be a heavy investment, it may look like a lot of expense, but when we can kind of tell the story of if we build to this over the next 2 years, we're going to be a completely transformed organization that has unlocked a ton of value through the use of technology.
Yeah, and I think even more importantly, it's like you're helping them realize a vision that they've always had but didn't know how to take the first step, right? It's like I think it's a way of laying it out and saying, I know you, because they're so focused inwardly on their business, right? And what they're doing in their day-to-day, that if you can show that roadmap out and say, this is what the business will look like later, I mean, it's got to be pretty exciting for them.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that a lot of our clients are surprised about is that, one of the first steps that we do to build that roadmap is come in and really understand the organization, assess where things are. We're having interviews with folks across the organization, and we always like to ask the question, like, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah.
And we're not asking about what keeps you up at night specific to IT.
No.
We want to know what keeps you up at night and see if there's some ways technology can really leverage that your internal team may have not thought of before, or there hasn't been a true IT leader in the organization that can think strategically and really look at, okay, here are the business problems. How does technology address them?
I mean, it's still a relationship business,
Yep.
right? Because we're all humans at the end of the day, right? With the, same problems with different names. But, I think that's a big part. I think it's a big part of what people are really trying to accomplish. Sometimes it just gets lost into it. You think IT, you don't think human relationships, you forget that part
Yep.
of the whole thing. But I mean, that's something I've seen you guys do a really great job with.
No, we love it. I mean, we love working with our clients. We're working across a number of industries. I'm excited when I see our team excited to dive into a new opportunity where it's hey, like this is what we're gonna do. Let's go figure it out. We really, to your point earlier about it's a we. We really partner with our clients to really make sure that they feel like we're part of the team and vice versa.
Well, it's like the golf tournament we were at, and our best golfer is on your team, and poor guy couldn't get out and hit our shots for us because we needed every one of his. But he's on the phone with the sponsor, the private equity sponsor, and the head of the portfolio company, talking to them in real time about, hey, I'll see you in Salt Lake City in 3 days. I have all the equipment being shipped out there, and that's in between shots. Like, to me, that's like, this really is a people business, and it is a relationship business, and that's something I've never seen before.
No, I mean, it's all about our client. I mean, we understand, the urgency, the value that a rapid execution can deliver. And we know that if we're there, we deliver, we execute, we're going to be along for the ride for the long haul, which is what we want with our clients.
I mean, every dollar matters at the end of the day, right? And I think that's a big part. It's not a number in a spreadsheet. It's not a number in a plan. It's actually somebody's business, right? And this is something we take very seriously. And I think that's a great thing. And I think that does help build the relationship a lot more.
For sure.
More, yeah. So, Greg, let me ask you. So, when you're talking to clients, prospective clients, and if they're small, medium-sized businesses, what's more important? Is it having good bones in place for the next owner or next acquirer coming through that they can then scale on in their own vision, or is it more something a little bit more niche-y?
Yeah, I mean, I think table stakes are doing as much as you can to reduce risk. I mean, the risk is the number one thing that, as our clients are getting evaluated during that due diligence process, we want to assure that as little IT and technology risk is present in there. So we, at a bare minimum, we're looking to, create a situation where we minimize risk. I think another thing that's kind of a table stakes, thing that we need to have in place as part of this process is, again, access to good data, reliable data, timely access to data. If we can't deliver on those things, we have some problems. So we really try to address those at a minimum up front. And then, we're also, we do understand that in a lot of cases, a potential buyer may have their own tech strategy that they're going to bring in. And, we don't want to create a situation where we've invested all this money in tech and it's not in alignment with what a potential buyer is. But what we found more often than not is that, tech investments are valued, during an acquisition. And if we've made the right foundational investments, that's going to be built on in the future. Like that's the foundation in a lot of cases, and we just want to have that good foundation in place. So we don't need to boil the ocean with a tech strategy and roadmap, but we have to have really solid tech that makes us look credible. That there's little risk, and that we have the data we need to to demonstrate that we can execute. Yeah,
that's a really important point, because I think I always focus on foundation. I think of it as for growth, but you bring up a great point. It's on the risk factors too. That's all well and good, but if the back door is left open or the risk door is left open, it's all for naught.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's as we go through the due diligence process, we want to be as far ahead as possible of any conversation about risk, cybersecurity posture. Yeah. We've, in a lot of cases, we've really tried to put world-class, best practice, cybersecurity processes in place for our clients, because we know it is going to get looked at so closely. We want to be as clean as possible so that we can start building some confidence that, they're good on the cybersecurity front. That means that, this is going to be far less risky of a potential acquisition. Like, no one wants to acquire a company and find out that it got hacked the next day.
No. As my client said, that's what prevented a sale process. Yep. And you're being pretty humble on your cybersecurity chops, because didn't you guys have a test? I think you were working on one of the portfolio companies of a PE sponsor's whole platform.
Yeah, we got, so that was an interesting and rewarding story in the sense that we were working for one of our clients that is PE backed. And the PE firm put all their portcos through the same cybersecurity evaluation program. Our client happened to be one of the smaller portfolio companies, but we ranked the highest by far as cybersecurity posture. And it was rewarding to see some recognition that, awesome. Hey, we're doing the right things here. We're on the right track. And it allowed us to focus on revenue driving activities within the client versus having to go back and correct cybersecurity deficiencies, which is likely happening with some of the other portfolio companies that didn't score as good. Yep. They've had to shift their IT strategy towards reactive defensive versus being on the offensive side.